This is part of the reason we have a housing crisis, is because it's too fucking expensive to
wait until the Looney Hour podcast I listened to. So they talked about that too. Wait until, because basically it takes 5, 6, 7, 8 years to build a high rise in Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver. It's a big project. They have to raise the money, go to the bank, build it, get the permits, and so now there's no shovels in the ground. So if you think it's bad now, and this is not speculation, there will be no new construction coming onto the market in Toronto in 2030. They're not building anything right now. And then on top of that, so it's so expensive to build, and now they think that a vacant land tax is going to incentivize the developers to build, but they're looking, going, guys, there's no demand, we can't build. So again, it just goes back to the same thing, just tax. Everyone is fed up with it. I don't want to be too negative in today's podcast, but like it's at the point where obviously this isn't working. Stuff is breaking. The economy is not doing well. We're falling further and further behind from the United States. Welcome everyone to the KBD podcast. So we got Bill Mitchell, regular guest here. We had a nice dinner last night with his son and one of my friends. You picked up the bill. Thank you. The Habs lost though. So it's okay. But we'll start the podcast off with a disclaimer to make sure that all of the compliance where Bill works with, that they're happy. This is for you guys. So Bill is the founder and co-portfolio manager of the Palos Mitchell Alpha Fund. Bill's opinions are his own and not those of Palos Management Incorporated. His comments and opinions should not be construed as investment advice. Welcome to the podcast again, Bill. And beautiful day here in Montreal. It's sunny. It's cold, but it's sunny at least.
Yeah. Signs of spring.
Signs of spring. Every single day or when I wake up or when I go to bed, not when I go to bed, but when the sun sets, I always look at my watch. It's always 2, 3, 4 minutes. What is it, 3 minutes longer each day or something?
I look at the end of the day, but I notice sometimes when you're driving now, 5:15, 5:20, it's still light out.
It's nice.
Yeah,
it's nice. When it's 4:30 and it's getting dark, it's like, oh my God, it's tough.
Yeah.
December is tough.
Yeah.
But we there's a lot going on. We're just talking some politics. We're talking markets. We're talking taxes. I mean, there's a lot to talk about taxes, but we're not going to go into that too much today. I think a good place to start right now, and because I haven't been following the markets that closely over the past couple of weeks, let's start with just like a macroeconomic view. Like, where are we at in terms of sentiment? Donald Trump just got inaugurated. How are the markets feeling right now?
Yeah, well, there's a tone of optimism for sure. What gets referred to as animal spirits, which is tied to deregulation, pro-business policies from Trump. These are things that definitely are catalysts to a market going up. Is when sentiment is positive. Mm-hmm. Then again, on the other side of the coin, you've got uncertainty, which comes from the daily missives that come from him that we're going to new tariff, Canada 25%, China 60%. So this creates a little bit of uncertainty, which is not good for markets, right? Because CEOs plan way ahead of time.
Oh, and when you're sorry to cut you off. When you're saying markets, are you talking American markets? Are you talking global markets?
Well, a bit of both.
Okay.
Actually.
So when you're saying tariffs, even when Trump says, I'm going to tariff Canada, I'm going to tariff China, that would even have a negative impact on American markets? That's what you're saying?
It could. Okay. It does there is this understanding now, right? This is Trump 2.0. Mm-hmm. So we've been down this road before. Mm-hmm. And I've learned to basically not listen to anything he says, which is my way of dealing with it.
Okay.
It doesn't mean I ignore it. I would rather read about it than watch him talk about it in real time. And markets do react in the short term. But any level of uncertainty, if you're a CEO and you're considering building a plant somewhere, spending some money on a capital project, you might sort of wait a little bit to find out exactly what's going to happen over the next few months with policies. Because just because Trump, gets his magic pen out and signs something, an executive order, doesn't mean that that's the end of it and it's law. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that can happen before it actually becomes law. So this is why I've learned to almost take with a grain of salt what he says. I'm hopeful that some of our leaders look at it the same way, while at the same time you have to be prepared for whatever scenario does come. For example, we spoke about this last time I was on the podcast, is I think he's completely bluffing with any with any likelihood that he's going to put 25% tariffs on Canadian energy that is exported to the U.S. It would just be too costly for Americans. They buy energy from us for several reasons, right? It's cheaper than they could get it anywhere else. It's reliable. It's from an ally who's geographically connected to the country. The pipeline infrastructure is in there. From the oil side of it, the grade of oil that they use to refine into gasoline in the States is mostly a heavy grade of Canadian crude, which you can't just buy anywhere. So I think he's trying to send the message to the oil patch.
Because the heavy crude, correct me if I'm wrong, because you have light crude, which is, so light and heavy crude, they're both used, yes, they're both oil, but they're used to make different types of products, right?
Exactly. Yeah, light sweet is better. It's a higher grade and it trades at higher prices than the Canadian heavy.
Okay.
But their refineries in the Midwest and in the Gulf Coast are designed to handle Canadian heavy oil. There's really few places to get it. Mexico, Venezuela, Canada. So if they were to put a tariff on that, it's clear it's a tax on Canadian business, American businesses and American consumers, which would affect the cost of transportation, the cost of travel, the cost of driving your vehicle for Americans. So this is why, I can't envision him actually going through with that. Maybe he will in a very short term before there's pushback, but it would just be too inflationary, number one. So I think it's a bargaining tactic, right, to get what he wants in other areas of negotiation.
And what does he want?
He wants, he wants to repatriate American business. He wants energy security. I mean, he said that. He said he wants energy security. It's much more secure, the excess oil coming from Canada, than anywhere else. Right.
When you say energy security, does mining fall under the category of energy?
Well, there's also security for critical metals as well. That's another thing.
Yeah, because that's something that I was reading, and we talked about this earlier on this week with Elliot. So he comes onto the podcast quite often too. You've never met him, but I was reading that. So he said publicly, all right, Canada, you got to get the number one, the 2% NATO commitment needs to be 2%. It can't be whatever it is right now. You guys got to spend more on your military. So that's related to defense. The second part that he really doesn't like is the fact that mining, and I didn't know this, China apparently controls quite a bit of mines in Canada. He didn't like that at all. And especially with the AI race, and especially with and I learned this morning. So the H100s, that's the processor that's used for the AI. There's a lot of it's like almost like a trade embargo over to China, but China is still able to get those H100s, so they can contribute to the AI race as well. But the U.S. is trying to put a stranglehold on these chips going over to China. If they gain more market share of the mines, they're going to be able to make more of these H100s, and whatever they're going to be in the future, they're going to be able to make them themselves. So that was just back to the main point. Trump's like, you need to have better defense, you need to have a stronger military, and we really don't like the fact that we feel as if China is influencing Canada more than we would like to admit. I don't have all the details, I don't know that much about it, but that's what I was reading, and that's something that he really doesn't like. And I get where Trump's coming from, because he's saying, hey, we're giving you guys a security guarantee, and we don't like the fact that China has all this influence on your country. So pick it up.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would agree with that, to be honest with you.
Okay,
there's a lot
I'd like to hear your opinion.
Yeah, breaking news. There's a lot of misinformation that comes out of Mr. Trump.
Yeah, but this wasn't Trump saying it, but this was...
Even mainstream business media, I find out of the U.S., there's... then again, am I misinformed or are they misinformed? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that's the thing
with media. We never.
Yeah, exactly. You got to do your own homework. But there have been projects in the past that the Chinese have tried to come into Canada and take over a company, and it was refused based on security. Right? Like they acquired a couple of Western Canadian energy companies. I think Talisman was one of them, and I forget the name of the other one.
So they are present in Canada, right?
Sure. And then they tried to take over another oil company, and at that point, regulators said, no, we're not letting you buy up all of our energy companies. Critical minerals or metals that are needed for AI or military or any really specific or even security sensitive issues. I mean, China rules the world. Like they've got these I won't even try to name them, but these metals you've never heard of. that are hard to find. We're sort of reliant on China right now to get our hands on those. You'd have to go into the table of elements to right at the very back end of it to know what these are. But I mean, Canada, we have these. The problem again is we've been asleep at the wheel for too long. We don't seem to be able to progress mining in our country without going through hoops and getting all kinds of regulation approved.
When was the last time a mine actually opened? A new mine was opened in Canada? I want to say it's over 5 years now.
Oh, you know what? That's a great question, and I don't have the answer.
It's been a while.
Yeah. I mean, the one that comes, I think, to my mind right away because it's Quebec-based would be Champion Iron Ore, which is has some of the highest grade iron ore in the world. I think that's up in the Baie-Comeau area. And we sell a lot to the Chinese because it's such a high grade, right? So that mine has been under development. There's probably a few copper mines maybe in BC and stuff like that. But Ontario has, I think it's called, is it the Ring of Fire or something around, I guess around Hudson's Bay type of thing, where there's a lot of potential mineral resources that could be mined. But again, you know, getting this done in Canada is difficult, and I think that puts us at a disadvantage.
Why is it difficult in Canada
to
get these things done?
Yeah. Boy, where do you want to start?
We're going to try and keep this apolitical.
Yeah.
But it's a constant theme, and it keeps coming back to this theme. And this is something that I would say, number one, why I like doing these types of podcasts and getting these clips is just because of the fact that I'd like to bring to the attention to the average Canadian that we do need to change the sentiment in the country, and we do need to recognize that we have a great opportunity in front of us. When we talk about this all the time, there's a massive opportunity in front of us to be energy independent, to make a shit ton of money. And the reality is, like, the world's not going to stop trading. If we don't take out the energy that we have and the resources that we have in our country, the buyers are just going to go somewhere else to get it. It's not like they're going to stop. The demand isn't going to just disappear. And so it's a shame that, you know, we're kind of, you know, we're 1.5 or 2% of global emissions, whatever they say that it is. And, you know, we've talked about this before too. If Canada was to disappear off the face of the earth, it would make no difference with regards to CO2 emissions. And you have China, you have India, and I'm not faulting them for this, but, you know, the middle class is getting bigger. When the middle class gets bigger, they buy new things, and it's just a fact that they use more energy. We also have the AI boom. So energy consumption globally is going to continue going up, whether we like it or not. So we might as well just come up with ways to get more efficient. I'm not saying we shouldn't continue to develop solar energy or wind energy, but we have to recognize the fact that we can't do that today. And oil and natural gas and nuclear, these are all great, in my opinion, great business opportunities for Canada to increase our standard of living.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head. You know, the table's been set, right, with Trump. I mean, he wants out of the Paris Accord. He's looking to bring coal back for power generation, drilling on government lands, drilling in Alaska, you know, drill baby drill, although the oil companies are not going to do that. That's another topic for discussion. But this is where things are going. So we can either, you know, participate or not participate in Canada, because we have an advantage in a lot of these areas. One example I can think of that is a positive thing that's happening in Canada, and we've talked about this before too, is the Coastal GasLink that's going to ship liquefied natural gas to Asia. It's been delayed. You know, how Canadian is that? So now we're looking at third or fourth quarter of this year rather than the middle of the year. But this is a project with partners at, you know, Malaysia, South Korea, China, Japan. These are our partners in this project. Actually, they led this project. There's really very little Canadian ownership, but it's you know, it's a conduit to sell our natural gas. We need more of this type of thinking. Like, you know, one of the first things Trump did, of course, was sign an executive order to take away Biden's moratorium on LNG export. So now they're going to be building more facilities. We need to do more as well. And I think this is coming because there are several projects on the horizon in Western Canada. They're going to be good for our natural gas. Now, I'm not talking about oil, I'm talking about natural gas here. So those are positives, but I would say we've got to advance these projects everywhere, like in all metals and not, you know, LNG, oil, uranium. I mean, we have the best grade of uranium in the world. It's another secure supply for America, so they need our uranium. Is he going to put a tariff on uranium? Probably not, but you never know, right? You never know what's going to happen. So
And uranium's used for nuclear.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Saskatchewan, I think, has the biggest uranium reserves in the world, I think.
Yep. Cameco, which is probably the biggest uranium producer in the world. There might be a company in like the national Kazakhstan uranium company, but again, you're talking about the other side of the world. It's not always reliable. But yeah, the Saskatchewan, northern Saskatchewan, and the Athabasca Basin, I believe it is, some of the best reserves in the world for uranium. And that's, again, we have an advantage in the world in selling uranium.
So do you think Trump threatening, whether it's a threat or whether he actually goes through with the tariffs, do you think this is also part of the reason why he's threatening these tariffs, whether it's or bluffing, whatever you want to call it? Do you think in his head he's thinking, you know what, guys? We're reshoring manufacturing. The world is preparing or potentially preparing for war. This is a reality. National security is very, very, very important. We consider Canada as part of our national security. I would like to say, we're good allies with them. We're not a threat. Obviously, we're not a threat to them. But do you think the fact that we can't get our act together with regards to extracting this energy, do you think that's part of the reason why he's pissed off at Canada? You think it's one of the reasons, or you think it has nothing to do with it? He's just trying to boss us around.
I think he's just trying to set the table for negotiations. It's his tactics, right? I mean,
what's he? This is the part where I don't know anything about it. Like, what's he trying to negotiate? What is he trying to gain?
Yeah, the upper hand, leverage in any negotiations is what he's trying to get the upper hand.
But in what specifically?
Everything. Really everything, and any commodities, basically anything. I mean, one day he says we don't need Canada's lumber and oil and gas and cars. Like, it's a bit of a ridiculous statement.
Yeah.
But this is the way he deals, right? The way I view it is, look, he came from the real estate world where if you're negotiating the sale of a property, it's one-on-one, essentially. So you do what you can to get the upper hand on the other person on the other side of the table. When you're dealing with financial markets, you're dealing with participants and investors around the planet. So I'm not sure he has a good grasp of how economics and how financial markets actually function, because he says stuff that can damage the long-term confidence in his beloved stock market. Right? He uses that as a measuring stick to how well he's doing. So that's one thing I don't think he has a good grasp on. I mean, just yesterday, he spoke virtually in Davos at the World Economic Forum, and he said, I want interest rates lowered immediately. Like, you just don't do that.
No.
It's just not done that way. And I don't know, again, you can't, is he that ill-informed, I'll use that soft word? I don't think he can be, because he has smart people around him who should be telling him how things really work. So the only logical conclusion I can come to is it's just bluster and negotiating tactics to get everybody else on the other side of the table all bent out of shape and afraid.
But then there's also play devil's advocate, because the Fed is projected to drop rates a few times this year, if I'm not mistaken. What's the projections right now?
Yeah, it's kind of leveled off because they took a lot of heat for dropping them last time.
Okay.
When, we didn't really, some people will say we didn't need to drop them, but the Fed's looking forward. There were signs that the economy was softening. Inflation was coming under control. I mean, these people have to make a decision at some point, right? They have a job to do that's supposed to be independent of politics. Are they going to be right every time? No. I was very critical of the Fed when they did not raise rates coming out of the pandemic, because inflation was clearly starting to build, and Chair Powell kept saying, it's just transitionary inflation.
Yeah.
It's not going to last.
Yeah.
I think anybody in my business knew it wasn't transitory. Inflation was picking up steam. So they waited too long to raise rates. Now they're concerned, are we going to wait too long to start cutting rates? And they're going to take heat either way. So the Fed, I think, most people agree that central banks should be autonomous from government. But then Trump says, cut rates now. Like honestly, it's he's not qualified to make that call, and he doesn't have the power to make that call. So again, what's the purpose of him saying something like that, being that disruptive to start telling the Fed what to do? The great thing about the Fed is they're independent of whoever's in
No,
power.
they're supposed to be independent.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Like if you look at this is where I always kind of take it with a grain of salt. So they're supposed to be independent, and yet the Treasury and Fed Powell and Chairman Powell speak on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So like, how independent can it actually be? But anyways, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
So if Canada drops interest rates more this year than the Fed, which they're projected to, because we got ourselves in a little bit of a pickle, especially with this housing issue that we got going on in Canada. It's very expensive to buy anything. It's a shit show, if you ask me. What does it mean if, and we've already started to kind of decouple from, I don't know if is that the term, decouple? Like basically, so we have to drop rates a lot quicker than the Fed has to, because we're in a lot more economic trouble than the United States is right now. If we continue on this trend and the Bank of Canada drops rates more this year than the Fed, what would that do for Canadians with regards to our standard of living? What would that do for the dollar? Would our dollar further fall in terms of value against the American dollar? What does this mean? What are the implications if the Bank of Canada drops rates more than the Fed?
Yeah, I mean, the intention of the central bank lowering rates is to make money cheaper, which in theory would stimulate economic activity, because you could borrow cheaper to invest, and over time that's intended to be stimulative for the economy. In the U.S. right now, most data is pointing to they don't need to stimulate the economy. It's humming along just fine.
Yeah.
At least that's what the numbers are showing today. So, if you were to buy an interest-bearing investment in the U.S. versus Canada, you're going to get a higher interest rate. So money gravitates to the U.S. The U.S. dollar gets stronger because you have to buy U.S. dollars to invest in a U.S. bond, right?
Yeah.
So this is what impacts the currency, which is why the Canadian dollar now is around $1.44, I think, spot rate. Because people are not investing in Canada. Why would you? If you can pick a number, you get 5% in Canada or 7% in the States,
it's a no-brainer.
Or 3 here versus 5 there. That's what's happening. Where traditionally over history, we had to put a premium on interest rates in Canada to attract money to Canada, because the States is the biggest, safest, most advanced capital markets or nation in the world. The safest place to put money, let's put it that way. So, it certainly is a challenge for the Canadian dollar. And investment is going to the States. And that's the biggest issue. And this is a global phenomenon, by the way. The Canadian dollar is doing fairly well compared to other currencies.
But you're also like comparing it to a basket of shit. I mean,
well,
Europe.
Not the ultimate shit. It's the middle of the road.
What's
That's
the
developed countries.
What's the saying there? You're the cleanest shirt and
the dirty laundry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's you're talking about the world's best currencies after the U.S.
Yeah.
You're talking
I guess,
British pound, euro, Canadian dollar, Swiss franc, stuff like that.
Yeah.
You're not talking about third world currencies.
Yeah. Or Bitcoin. So from an investment standpoint or investment strategy, I know you can't talk about individual stocks, but right now, what's your overall strategy? Is it as simple as, I'm not investing in Canada right now. I want to stay away from Canada. I don't like the investment environment. I don't like the sentiment in Canada. The fact that the dollar keeps getting weaker against the United States currency right now. Are you just saying, I'm just going to go to the U.S. I'm focused on the U.S. What are you doing right now?
Yeah, it's kind of what we've been doing for a while, is over allocating to the U.S. I mean, we have a global universe of investable stocks, right? So we can pretty much go anywhere that's in a developed market, but we stick to North America. But yes, we're less focused on Canada and more focused on the States. Although, the way we look at markets is we use a thematic overlay as well, right? Like we invest in companies where we think you're going to get your best bang for the buck or the best growth in a specific industry. So we've always been kind of aligned with that in managing the funds portfolio. Canada's great in my opinion for energy, commodities, world-class banks, things like that. If you want to invest in tech,
well, would you want to? I just want to stop you right there. Let's double click on that. For banks, the fact that banks are so correlated to real estate in Canada, and no one really knows what's going to happen in real estate in Canada, and they're throwing everything in the kitchen sink to keep real estate prices up. Wouldn't that be a concern? Like, wouldn't you want to stay away from banks if a big part of their portfolio is mortgages for Canadians?
Well, that is like, one consideration.
Okay, but is that like how are the markets looking at Canadian banks right now? Like, what do they like and what do they not like about Canadian banks? Because like as far again, I'm not the expert, you're the expert, but if I see a Canadian bank, logically I'm going, you know what? I think this is a house of cards. There's clearly trouble in the real estate and the housing market in Canada, and their book is real estate. I want to stay away from this.
Yeah.
Are markets looking at it the same way or not necessarily?
Again, real estate mortgages would be a slice of the pie as far as the different business interests that banks are in, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
wouldn't it be the biggest chunk though most of the time?
No, not necessarily. I mean, if you look at let's just take. I'm not recommending these stocks by any means, but let's take the bigger Canadian banks, the Royal Bank and BMO and TD. I mean, they have businesses in the States. So over time, they've become a sort of a hybrid between a Canadian and a U.S. bank. So if you want to have a bit of exposure to both, you can do that by owning a Canadian bank. Canadian banks are different from U.S. banks. We've got 6 banks. I think there's over 3,000 in the States. So there's a lot of speculation that, again, with deregulation, possibly you'll see a lot of consolidation in U.S. banks, the smaller banks, because they don't need that many banks. And so it's more risky for a small bank, right? You're exposed to failure more than a big bank.
They had all that stress in the regional banks.
Yeah, exactly.
What, a year and a half ago, 2 years?
Yeah. Started with the Silicon Valley Bank, and it was mismanagement of risk at the bank level. Yeah. But again, it just goes to show, even the smartest people in the room are supposed to be the smartest people in the room. The ones managing risk for a bank messed up, right? They invested long term. In what they invest in, right? Banks take your money in and they invest it to sort of make the spread. I mean, they bought long term. And then all of a sudden, when there's a rush to exit and they need to come up with cash, they take a hit on the long-term securities that they own, which is why you should be staying short-term if you're a bank, so you can liquidate quickly if you have to meet the demands of withdrawals, right? It's very simple banking 101, but they failed at that in the U.S. And then, of course, the finger gets pointed at the regulators because they failed to see it. So it's a bit surprising, right, that you would think that a bank could fail because the risk managers at the bank completely failed in their job. But it happens. It happens. So that's what happened down there. I think Canadian banks are just reputed to be, amongst the best in the world. That's always been at least the belief around the world. And then on the other side of that, I mean,
but that belief again, I want to stop.
Yeah, sure.
That belief that Canadian banks can never, I don't want to say fail, but they can never go through hard times. Like, when was the last time Canada really had a bad, tough recession? Like, when was the last time we ever had something like 2008? Have we ever had something like that?
Yeah, well, COVID. It was temporary.
But that was temporary, and then they just printed until infinity and beyond. But like, let's say, for example, like the GTA right now for real estate, especially pre-sale condos, there's a big problem going on there right now, and it's going to get nasty. So if that's going to hit Bay Street, which it is going to hit Bay Street, like, wouldn't this have severe consequences for the banks? Like, there's clearly something brewing in the GTA. And GTA in Vancouver's not as bad, but the pre-sale condo market in GTA it's going to be a bloodbath. Like, it's already starting, and it's going to get worse. Yeah. Like, wouldn't that, again, I'm just going back to the same hypothesis. Like,
sure. Canadian banks, it could have an impact. Different banks have different levels of mortgage exposure. There's one I can think of that's more exposed to mortgages than the other. Then again, it's kind of, you look at the real estate market, like, we have short memories, right? Like in 2007, 2008, the real estate market collapsed in the U.S. It stayed fairly robust in Canada because we don't take the same kind of risk. Real estate markets go down. Again, we forget, right? Ever since COVID, when people decided they wanted to get out of downtown and out to the suburbs or invest in real estate, our market has doubled. I guess the price of homes have doubled, let's say, in Canada. So it doesn't mean they're going to keep doubling every 5 years. I mean, there's times when housing markets can go down. So in my opinion, I think we're susceptible to that because of the way our mortgage market works in Canada. In the U.S., you have a 30-year mortgage, possibly, right, on your home. So you're not that
Imagine getting
exposed.
A 30-year mortgage at 3%.
Yeah, well,
nice.
They used to have them in Canada because I know my parents had one.
Wow.
At like 1.5%. My dad carried it. Yeah, my dad carried it the whole time. Like, he kept rolling it over into a new one. Now, I think at the time it was probably like a $11,000 mortgage. Was it to pay for the whole house in 1962?
Yeah.
But yeah, the issue in Canada is with interest rates, going up, and mortgage rates have been going up. And by the way, just because the central bank is lowering interest rates doesn't mean that interest rates in the market are going to go the same way. We're seeing that in the States, right? Like the bond yields are going the opposite of what the Fed's doing, cutting, which is another troublesome sign that we can talk about as well.
Yeah. So what does that mean?
Yeah, it means that the bond market is worried.
And they're worried about what?
Debt and deficits, government spending. Yeah. So the real market is not following what the Fed's trying to do. The Fed's lowering, real rates are going higher for whatever reason. Inflation, fear, loss of confidence.
And would part of that inflation fear come from the fact that if Trump does follow through with these tariffs tend to be inflationary? And so let's just go through a scenario.
Yeah.
So he does implement these tariffs. The inflation hits, and when you're implementing tariffs, just the cost of things go up. That is, by definition, going to be inflationary. It's more expensive. If inflation went up to 5-6%, and then, the Fed would most likely have to put their rates up to 7-8% or whatever, and that would be, this is kind of what the markets are looking at right now. So the chance that there might or could still be inflation.
Yeah. The market is looking at the 5% level on the U.S. government 10-year bond. It's almost like the street is a bit obsessed with that. By the street, I mean, investors, professional investors, Wall Street, Bay Street, right? It's the 10-year. Everyone's looking at the 10-year because if it goes north of 5%, that's a breakout to the upside, which means that interest rates are going to be going higher, and therefore, it's inflationary. It costs more to borrow money. So it's bad for the economy. There's a lot of negatives to that. So I think that's one of the things that they're looking at. The other one, and Trump has promised the cost of living would go down. His way of doing it is to say, drill, baby, drill. Get the oil patch to produce even more oil. That will make the price down. Yesterday, he was lobbying the Saudis to drop, but it's not going to happen. Wall Street, the oil patch on Wall Street has been very clear. We got into trouble before because we spent most of our capex on finding more oil, right? Everybody was in a race to find more oil. That put a lot of companies under and really hurt the industry. Now there's a balance. They're going to produce as they profit from it. They're making good money because they're being disciplined. So this is on record from CEOs, the Chevron and Exxon and stuff. We're not going to follow the president's directive just because he says produce more oil if it's not in our interests.
Aren't they right now the biggest oil producer in the world?
Yeah.
So
I mean, prices are a lot lower than they were previously. But again, it's what Trump says. And does he have the means to achieve it? No, he's telling his voters what they want to hear. Quite frankly, that's what I think it is. We kind of got away from the mortgage thing. My concern was that in Canada, when people have to renew in 25 and 26, after 5 years, they're going to have sticker shock on how much they're going to be paying for their mortgages. At the sort of the lower end, right?
Yeah.
I have a fear that people won't be able to afford their homes. One of the phenomena about housing is more people want to buy as prices are going up, and people don't buy when prices are going down because they expect their prices are going to go even lower. So you end up with what you think would be more buying when prices fall. It doesn't always work out that way.
It's not like a real estate. It's not a rational buy. It's a very emotional buy. It's not like buying a stock, in my opinion, at least. I want to ask you a question though about Danielle Smith. It's been very controversial, so keep it objective. You don't have to offer a major opinion, but with regards to the impacts this would have on Canada. So on the one side, you have the provinces of Canada and the federal government essentially came out with a statement saying, hey, by the way, if you tariff us, Mr. Trump, we're going to hit you back with tariffs or consequences as well. Whatever that may be remains to be seen. Danielle Smith said, I'm not signing that. I'm not interested in essentially signaling that she's not interested in playing a game of chicken with the United States, with Canada's most important commodity and Alberta's most important commodity by far. If there was to be tariffs on oil coming from Alberta, that would have major consequences for Canada and even more severe consequences for Alberta. So how, in your opinion, how do you think she's handling this situation. And again, there's a lot of speculation. No one knows what Trump's going to do because he was supposed to tariff Canada on the first day he came into office. He hasn't. And they asked him 2 or 3 days ago, and he goes, I think February 1st, I'm going to put the tariffs. He goes, yeah, I'm going to put them on Mexico, and I'm going to put them on Canada. So right now, how Danielle Smith is handling this, do you have any comments to offer?
I mean, I like her. She's obviously looking out for the best interests of her constituents in Alberta.
Yeah.
I sometimes wonder, is this a case of good cop, bad cop? Mm-hmm. Like, she's willing to play ball with Trump on energy, while Doug Ford says we're going to stop sending you electricity. So, there's positioning going on. You have to answer to your constituents at home. A lot of what Trump says you got to take with a grain of salt. As a Canadian, I look at it this way. We've grown up, schoolyard scraps and scraps on the ice in hockey.
Not anymore.
Right? Well, yeah, not anymore. Yeah.
Not anymore.
Let's call it back in the day. Even your day.
Yeah.
If
get in trouble now.
Sure. I mean, if a bully picked on you in the schoolyard, right? I mean, I was on the smaller side of kids growing up.
You hit him back.
Well, you got to land a punch.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to get, you're going to get the snot kicked out of you in all likelihood. But if you don't land a punch and at least give the bully the black eye or a bit of a bleeding lip, he's going to come back again and again and again. Mm-hmm. So this is where I understand, as a nation, we're a proud nation. And it's not like we're really, look, sure, it would hurt, right?
What would hurt?
Tariffs could potentially cause a drop. I've heard anywhere from 1% to 3% in GDP. It would last 12 months. It would last 3 years. We don't know. But I think that you have to respond, because if you don't, you're just going to be taken advantage of forever. So you've got to stand your ground and you got to fight back. It's basically an economic war. They fired the first shot. Look at it that way if you want to be extreme. So you got to fight for yourself. So how do we do that in Canada? The first step would be, I think we would think things out, and like last time, right? And then just target certain areas to hopefully, cooler heads will prevail down the road and you'll get a deal and everything's great the way it should be.
Do you think right now the fact that Trudeau is also opening his yap to say that they're going to retaliate against Trump if he puts tariffs, do you think this is smart of him to be doing it? And the reason I'm asking this question is because I think Trump, just as a person, there was a tweet I saw on X. It was a clip of Justin Trudeau just giving a spiel saying essentially, we're going to retaliate if you guys tariff us. Yeah. You're not going to get a good response from Trump if you talk to him like that. I feel like with Trump, you almost have to let him think that he's getting the upper hand, and maybe he is actually getting the upper hand. But saying, we're going to fight back tooth and nail, and there's no way you're going to take advantage of us. I mean, there's also the reality that, and we were talking about this yesterday, there's the reality that we are heavily dependent on the United States. They're our biggest trading partner. They're the biggest economy in the world. Whether we like it or not, the reality is we need the U.S. a lot more than they need us.
That's true.
And so Trump does have leverage in that scenario. And I'll just go back to kind of Danielle Smith, how she's negotiating like this. She recognizes this. And she recognizes that Trump knows that. And again, she doesn't want to play chicken with our most important commodity. And some people saying, oh man, you should be joining with the rest of Canada. And basically, we got to stand up to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the proper response to talk to Trump. He doesn't number one, he doesn't take Trudeau seriously, nor should he. And I think it would be a lot more effective if you were to schmooze him, talk to him, let him think that he's winning. He probably would win. But, massage his ego, I think, is a lot better way to deal with a guy like that, as opposed to saying, we're going to fight you. Because he's just going to go, oh, yeah? Okay. You want to fight me? Let's go. Because he's going to go, I can go at this a lot longer than you guys can.
Knowing myself, I would be incapable of schmoozing him.
But do you know what I'm saying, though? Kind of like he is that. Like, he does have an ego. I do agree with a lot of his policies. Does he have an ego? Absolutely. Is he narcissistic? It would appear he is narcissistic. He definitely has narcissistic tendencies. But this is what you're dealing with. And at the end of the day, they're going to win the battle. They're going to win the negotiation. If they want to put us in the ground, they can put us in the ground. This is just the reality. And this is the reality I think a lot of Canadians need to wake up to. We're not going to win this battle. Like, you're just not. So I agree, you can negotiate you can try to negotiate from a strong point of view, but when push comes to shove, he's going to win.
Yeah, I would look at it this way. If we go tit for tat, you're not picking a battle with Trump. You're picking a battle with specific states, right, that rely on Canada for trade. I believe there's 36 states that Canada is their number one trading partner. And if you remove energy from the equation, we actually buy more from the states than they buy from us. The thing is we are more dependent on them than they are on us, right? Because they just have a naturally bigger domestic economy.
But that main word you just said, energy, if we lose those trading relationships with the United States, energy is so important to Canada. It's the biggest reason why our living standards haven't completely collapsed over the past 10 years. If we don't have oil today, our currency is going to get absolutely smacked. It's one of the reasons that our dollar isn't getting hurt more than it is today.
Yeah.
So it's like Canadians they're going to go, oh, well, it's only 3.2% of GDP. We're getting hard currency. When people are buying oil, it's hard currency coming into the country. It's propping up our dollar.
Yeah.
So, like,
at the same time, though,
it's just I'll just say this last point. It's like, it's just I get frustrated when Canadians think they have the upper hand. You do not have the upper hand. It's like the same thing of me if I'm negotiating with a big insurance company, and I know that they're a massive insurance company, and I can try my best to negotiate in certain ways, but at the end of the day, there are times when they're like, no, that's the deal. That's the best you're going to get. Take it or leave it. And what am I going to do? And if I was in their shoes, I would be doing the same thing because you have negotiating power. It's the same thing with Amazon. It's the same thing with Costco. It's the same thing. You're negotiating on their terms because they're bigger, they're stronger than you, and they have more money than you. This is just the reality of negotiations and how business actually works. And again, I just want to go back to it. I get frustrated with Canadians sometimes. I'm not saying don't stand up to Donald Trump. I'm not saying that, but I get frustrated at how we think we can be the tough negotiator in this scenario. It's not a reality.
Yeah, I agree with you to a certain extent, but when it comes to energy, I would push back on the fact that they actually need what we have. Like, we do have, I think, a stronger hand.
Okay.
Because if that's where there was speculation, right? You put 25% tariffs on oil, we're going to put a 25% export tax. So now it's 50%. That will cause inflation in the States, no doubt. You just don't change the way the energy infrastructure is set up in the U.S. overnight. You don't do it in 1 year. You probably don't do it in 5 years. So in a way, we do have one tactical advantage there is if I'm, let's play king of the world again, or king of Canada. If I'm king of Canada, and I'm playing a poker game. I think he's done that himself. He's fired himself. No, but I mean, you got to know your adversary, and you've got to know your hand, like your strengths of your hand. And I still think, and I could be wrong, I think that over the longer term, it's in the U.S. best interests to buy our energy for other reasons I mentioned before. It's cheaper. It's reliable, it's readily available, the infrastructure is built. I mean, it's all there, right? So if they tax it, they're taxing themselves. Trump is taxing American businesses and consumers because the price at the pump will go up. I've seen anywhere from 35 cents to $1. Let's split it down the middle, 70 cents a gallon. That's not going to be taken well by Americans, right? Like paying 70 cents more a barrel. And if we put another 25% on, it's going up $1.50 a barrel or whatever. So to me, it's not happening. This is where I think he's bluffing. So that's not happening. When it comes to negotiating, kind of look at it this way, right? You've got the king, and you've got 100 senators from various states. So this is the strategy that Ottawa used last time when we were negotiating the free trade deal. The famous one was Tennessee Jack Daniels, right? Tennessee bourbon. Canadians drink a lot of Jack and Coke, let's face it. It's a favorite beverage up here, and I think we're the number one buyers of Kentucky bourbon.
I didn't know
so
that.
They targeted Kentucky, right?
Okay.
Mitch McConnell's state, right? So that gets the constituents in Tennessee up in arms because now they've got a glut of bourbon because the Canadians aren't buying it. I've seen stuff like taking California wine, taking U.S. wines off the shelves at the LCBO stores. You got to pick your battles where you know you have a chance to win. But you're absolutely right. Like, we're no match. You know, again, it's the bully in the schoolyard. Like, I know this guy's coming at me for my lunch change. He's going to beat the crap out of me, but I got to land a punch so he stops doing it. That's kind of, you know, the layman's way of looking at it. But I think that's where you just cannot succumb to his whims. You have to fight back, and you have to fight back with common sense and brains. Where we have a problem right now is there's no captain of the ship, right? So who is speaking for Canadians? So Daniel Smith, you know, veered away from the pack when we wanted to put up a united front. And I just wonder in the back of my mind, is that a good cop, bad cop? Like, we have a door open to negotiating, particularly with energy, but then you've got maybe Doug Ford, who just called an election, I think this morning.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Kind of fighting for Canadian interest. You know, you've got Canadian pride. I mean, I'm just hopeful at the end of the day, this is all just bluster and negotiating tactics. You know, if they want to sell more milk in Canada, so be it. Like, you know, you got to give up something to get something. You know, that's a bee in his bonnet, right? Is the fact that we don't, because of our supply chain management in Canada for dairy products, we wouldn't open up the door to U.S. dairy, which ticks off Wisconsin.
I guess it's just the point that, like, it worries me when we think like that. You're bringing up excellent points, but it worries me a little bit because we are in a weak position right now, economically speaking. Yeah. We don't have a leader politically right now. It's a mess. Ottawa's a mess. Productivity in Canada is a mess. Like, we're in a really weak position. Yeah. And I think Trump smells blood, and maybe he'll do something, maybe he won't. So I don't know. I'm just kind of, you bring up good points. I'm just saying, like, you don't want to completely piss him off to the point where he'll cut off his nose to what's the saying? Cut off your nose to spite your face. Yeah. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he does that either, just because the fact is, like, well, we're the U.S., we'll be fine. Yeah, it'll be a little bit of a hit, but you know what? I got 4 years anyways. I don't really give a shit if gas goes up to that price. You're not listening to me. You're insulting me. Boom. Here are the tariffs.
But he isn't king, by the way. I mean, he likes to think he's king, and you know, the Silicon Valley billionaires are bowing to kiss the ring type of thing, which is kind of sickening in itself. But you know, he can say stuff, but if the cost of energy goes higher, there's going to be a lot of people in the U.S. that are going to be upset. People in industry, people in specific states, they don't want their prices to go up. So I think, you know, my hope, like, actually, this the silver lining of it all is it's a huge wake-up call for Canada.
Yeah.
Right? Like, hello. Yes. Like, this is what happens when you rely on one market to sell your most important resource.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's our own doing. We have to figure out a way, and it's not hard, to sell our commodities around the world. I mean, during the crisis in Europe with Russian gas being shut off, Germany basically came to Canada and said, can we get a deal done where we buy Canadian liquefied natural gas off the east coast of Canada, because it's much closer than the United States markets. You just ship right across. And our government said, well, no, that would be a bigger carbon footprint. And Quebec said, well, we don't want a pipeline running across. So it's like, what outcome do you expect when you have no bargaining power? Things are happening in Western Canada, thank God, with you know, getting infrastructure built to get energy out of Canada to markets other than the U.S. But let's say we do that with a lot of other commodities that we have, whatever it takes. Let's do deals. For God's sakes, we have barriers between provinces in Canada. That's another thing that's come on the table as a result of Trump's, you know, tariff threats, is all of a sudden in Canada we're recognizing maybe we should, like, have free trade in Canada within provinces before we start worrying about anything else. So that's another positive that may come out of this, right? So
can you explain that for the viewers? Free trade, like all the trade barriers between provinces and the effects it has on prices of goods and services in Canada?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not an expert on that.
Just like a broad overview. We don't need to go into like the nitty-gritty details.
You know, it's to protect domestic industries or you know, business activities in a certain province. I'm just going to pick an example that's not even a real example, but let's say Quebec decides to put a tariff on Ontario blueberries because we grow a lot of blueberries for consumption here, and we don't want Ontario blueberries coming in, so therefore we'll put a tariff, right? I remember back years ago, and I'm not even sure if this law is still in effect, but it was illegal to transport beer and wine across a provincial border. Because I know when I was much younger, wine was much cheaper in Ontario. So a lot of people would drive over to Hawkesbury or Lancaster and buy wine and bring it back to Quebec. It was actually an illegal activity. I know that I actually tried to send a gift to somebody in Toronto that was liquor related, and I don't know if it was Canada Post or UPS or FedEx or whatever, wouldn't accept it. Like, you cannot send booze across the border. It's illegal. So that's just one example, right? I'm sure there's lots of others. But let's get a free trade agreement done in Canada, right? Which is good for us. Like, let's just learn to get along, and let's learn to pull together and look forward, because we, like I've said before on this podcast, we have everything the world could possibly need. Tons of it, more than we'll ever need. Yet we seem to have a hard time monetizing it, like doing the right things to sell it at the highest price.
Do you think a Conservative government will solve this, or do you think there's deeper issues in Canada and we got a lot of work ahead of us to get this done?
I'm skeptical about anything when it comes to government getting something done. Was it Ronald Reagan that said the most 9 feared words are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help"? But you have to assume that the Conservatives are the likely next government in Canada. They're more business friendly. They're more energy friendly. They have gone on record saying they're going to axe the carbon tax, and they're going to get rid of the capital gains tax that the Liberals floated that never got passed. And now Chrystia Freeland is also on board of that, and I think so. It's amazing how quickly they changed their tune.
Yeah, she said she wouldn't do the carbon tax either. I thought the carbon tax put more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians. Why would she want to cut the carbon tax? I don't get it.
I don't know enough about the carbon tax. It's a political football, obviously. But whatever it takes to make our energy industry more friendly to making money and attracting investment to Canada, when a lot of global investment is going to the States, you've got to stop that from happening, right? So how do we do it? We need to make Canada business friendly.
We need to make Canada business friendly, and I want to stay on this topic just for a little bit. We need to make Canada more business friendly, and this is what I always talk about. Sometimes people get pissed off at me because I just like to tell the realities of how business actually works and how foreign capital invests is if it can make $1 in this province or country and $10 in the other province or country, it's going to go to the place where it can make $10. So the perfect example, and I did go on a rant, and I'm going to keep this as objective as I possibly can, but so I was talking about unions, or the fact that Amazon just left Quebec. And I don't want your opinion on whether you agree with unions or not, but the reality is Amazon tried to unionize that location in Quebec. Quebec is notorious for being union central. It's like Quebec is essentially like France. I think Quebec's worse than France. Anyways, don't quote me on that. But Amazon said, you know what, we're going to get out of here. So whether you agree or disagree with unions, at a time when our productivity per capita has fallen off of a cliff, at a time when businesses do not want to come to Canada because they can't be bothered with all the red tape, and especially in Quebec, you have all these language laws, you have all the taxes, you have all the bureaucracy. It's just a pain in the ass to operate. They go, you know what, I can't be bothered. So the point that I was trying to make, where I was kind of getting pissed off as a Quebecer, is like, yet again, we just scare away business. And it's example after example after example. And when are we going to learn that in order for us to keep our standards of living or to increase our standard of living, that you need to have business here? The business needs to be here so that we can tax the businesses, we can tax their profits, which would fund our welfare state and our social services and our quality of life. So that's always the point I'm trying to make. Yeah. People lose their minds if you say anything bad about a union. And there's a lot of people, because I've actually been talking to people that used to be part of unions. And I'm not saying all unions are bad, and I have kind of like a mixed opinion, because there are definitely examples of business owners exploiting workers, for sure. But there's also other examples of unions just being absolute pains in the ass, and they don't want to do anything, and they basically can put a company under because they're just being unreasonable. So I guess, like, I don't want to, like, put you on the spot here, but I'm just trying to think, what's my question? How did we change the sentiment in Canada outside of just bringing in a conservative government that's more business friendly? That is, I think, a step in the right direction. But, like, what else can we do to attract business into Canada? Because I don't see a plan.
Yeah. We need a plan. For sure, we need a plan.
Like, the only thing that the Conservatives have really said, they're going to drop some taxes. Hopefully they'll put on, like, a hiring freeze in Ottawa. And they're going to help or try and fix the housing market. I haven't heard anything else.
Yeah. I mean, just thinking out loud off the top of my head, I mean, if somehow the government was to say, we're putting in a Energy East infrastructure program where we are going to build, pipelines to get Canadian energy from Western Canada shipped off the east coast of Canada to Europe, do you think anybody would invest in that? Hell yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the money would fly into Canada.
Oh yeah.
Especially from Europe. If Europe could get it, like the Coastal Gas Link is, like I said, it's 5 Asian nations backing it. 4 and Shell.
And Europe,
Shell was the other one, the other partner, right? Shell.
And
Shell
Europe
oil.
right now, just to add on to that, Europe right now, they do not want to be reliant on Russian energy.
No, that's come to an end, and that's probably unlikely to change. But they're reliant on, like, liquefied natural gas. A lot of comes from Qatar and the U.S. Okay, so I'll go back to, can we have a competitive advantage? We've got just as much as the U.S. does. As far as we got more than we will ever need, as far as natural gas and hydrocarbons go, right? And dirt cheap in Canada. So if we sell it into Europe, you're going to make a lot of money because they're going to come and buy it because they can buy it here cheap and sell it in their own market for more. Eastern Canada is closer to Europe than Louisiana or Houston. Competitive advantage. It's cheaper here to produce. Competitive advantage. You just need to wake up. You need to realize that the prospects that are there, and in a way, you're going to go toe to toe with U.S. industry, and I think we can win because we just have. We have what it takes to get that done. The thing is red tape, how long it takes to get a project started. Too many people don't want it. Too many people in Canada think that electricity comes from the holes in the wall.
Yeah.
Like, honestly.
Yes, I know.
Like, it's education too.
I know.
How important is energy? We touched, we were talking about this previously about the importance of data centers. This morning I heard that there's a data center being built by, I believe it's Amazon, and I believe it's in Texas. And like the size of this data center is the equivalent of 2/3 the size of Manhattan. I mean, think about how large that is, okay? So it's going to be built in Texas. Now, two things you need for, obviously, for a data center is electricity.
Air conditioning.
And you have to cool it, right? It runs hot. You got to cool it. So.
And the Texas heat, that ain't going to be nice.
It takes about 5 seconds, and you're going to draw electricity away from air conditioners to the data center, right?
Yeah.
So it takes you about 5 seconds to think of what advantage Canada could have in this regard. It's naturally cooler here in the north. So you could build a data center, north of Edmonton, let's say, or northern BC, or somewhere where you have a natural cooling.
But this is what you're bringing up a perfect example, and this is what I'm talking about. And if you go look at the data center that Kevin O'Leary is trying to build in Alberta, and we talked about this yesterday, Daniel Smith called him, said, come on down. We want you to invest in this $70 billion data center project here in Alberta. Kevin said, well, this is according to Kevin, he said, well, I can't do that because there's some bill or something stopping me from doing that. And Daniel Smith said, no. I am suing the federal government for that. Come on down. You're allowed to build the data centers. I'll make sure of that. Yeah. And then I went on the internet, typed in Kevin O'Leary, data centers Alberta. The first 4, 5, or 6 search results in Google were all negative. The first one was obviously CBC. he's displacing native reserve land. The second one was how much pollution this is going to cause. The third one was kept going on and on. It's just negative, negative, negative. So point I'm trying to make is that mentality I don't think is going to change by just bringing in a conservative government. And I think it takes education for people to actually realize like what's going on and what would be best for Canada. But you're right. People think energy comes from a hole in the wall. You just plug it in and there's energy. Yeah. And people think that social services and welfare we just have that the government has an endless pit of money and that money doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of Canadians think.
Well, this is where you need the adults in the room to take charge in Canada. Like stop. You have to stop the constant opposition to anything progressive in terms of business or commerce in Canada and realize how much it hurts us.
I have a really, really good idea before you say that. Yeah. I bet this would work. If government would get out of the way, that would probably work.
Absolutely. Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Get out of the way. That's a great slogan.
That's one thing that the Liberal government are excellent at doing. They have to have their hands in everything.
Yeah.
They got to have their hands in everything. They have to have an opinion on everything. What happened to the days of just saying, of just letting the market take its course?
Yeah.
What happened to those days?
That might be a great election slogan actually for the Conservatives, right? We'll just get out of your way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Vote for us. We'll get out of your way.
That is a good slogan.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah. Can we get that
Set it here
patented? I mean, I would hazard a guess if you went onto First Nations territory somewhere in Saskatchewan or Manitoba or Alberta or BC, and you said, listen, we would like to invest $2 billion in a data center. Mm-hmm. Okay. What do you think they would say? Where do we sign?
Yeah.
Right? If we're getting a piece of that
as long
pie,
as they're
where do we sign?
Yeah, give them a cut and that's it.
But what you'll read in the media is that somebody from the First Nations will stand up and claim to be representing them, that this would be terrible for this particular First Nations, this is what you deal with, right? You deal with a lot of, and again, I'm no expert, but I have looked into it a little bit. Even in Western Canada, when it comes to pipelines on native lands, you've got the elected band council and you've got the hereditary chief who can't, they're opposite sides of, completely different interests. So the media usually picks up on the hereditary leaders who are opposed to a energy project on their land.
And the hereditary leaders, if I had to guess, are probably towards the end of their life and can't be bothered.
They weren't elected.
Oh, they weren't elected.
No, like great grandpappy was the chief, right? So now I'm the chief.
Okay.
And again, I'm just being, I'm no expert, but this happened on the, I believe it was the Wet'suwet'en lands with the pipeline. And I forget the lady who was the representative at the elected bound council level. She said, look, we're for this project. Like, all we see is the media covering protests and, how much we do want this project. But the media takes the other side and runs with it. And this is what we get inundated with and what people consume on social media and on our legacy news networks. It always is the controversial, agenda-based argument.
I wouldn't say on social media. You guys.
Well, not all social media.
But the boomer, you guys are the boomers, and I'm not picking on you here. The boomers are the only people that watch CBC and legacy media today.
Yeah.
So I think when the millennials, by 2030...
This one doesn't.
By 2030, millennials, people in my age category, we're going to be the biggest... we're going to represent the biggest percentage of the workforce. It's definitely North America, or was it international? Anyways, we're going to be the decision makers very soon. And I think the fact that legacy media is dying, the only people who watch legacy media today are the boomers. And I understand why you guys would watch, not you, but other boomers, why they would watch CBC, because 30 years ago, 40 years ago, they would actually report the news. Yeah. Today, they're basically a mouthpiece for the Liberal government. And it's no wonder, because Trudeau, one of the first things he did when he came into power was he goes, oh, here you go, guys. Here's some more money. It's to help you with your budget. It's obviously a bribe, but they'll call it as just an investment with CBC.
Yeah.
It's a bribe. And the point I'm trying to make is, as legacy media becomes less and less influential, I think we'll actually be able to get stuff like this done and projects like this done, because they'll have less influence on society and on how people think. I don't think that's going to happen overnight, though. So I am confident that a conservative government will help the business environment and the business sentiment in Canada over the next 10 years. However, I don't think it's going to change like that overnight. And there's a lot of things that need to happen, and Canadians kind of need to wake up. I think the West has woken up with regards to that. We need energy. They want energy. They want the jobs. Danielle Smith, I really like Danielle Smith. I think she's a good leader. I think she's strong. But in other parts of Canada, I don't, from what I've seen and what I read and what I watch, I don't think they've woken up to the realities of what we're dealing with here in Canada and the absolute, I don't want to call it absolute, but our economy is not very good right now. Anyways.
Well, things change slowly, and then suddenly they change overnight.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I saw CNN let a bunch of people go the other day.
Yeah.
Things change, technology changes, habits change. If I think back to when I was a kid, we got the newspaper twice a day.
Yeah.
You got the morning edition, and you got the afternoon edition of the Montreal Star. So that was your news, that and the radio, right?
Yeah.
And then, traditionally, again, as I was older, it's like the evening news. Everybody watched the evening news. Mm-hmm. So now news isn't disseminated that way, right? It's a lot of it is through social media. Which is great.
X is a big one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't. I mean, I've told you this myself. I don't have any more news apps. I took them all off my phone. Mm-hmm. I don't watch CNN. I don't watch MSNBC. I never watch Fox. I don't CBC, CTV. I don't watch the news anymore. Honestly, I look for the news. If I obviously you hear about something, I'll research sources that I know are reliable and credible if I want to know about something. Right? Mm-hmm. Like. That's just the way I do it. So maybe I'm a progressive boomer, I suppose.
But because it is important. If you want to get stuff done, it helps to have the media on your side. Yeah. And so if the legacy media isn't going to be on the side of pro-business development policies in Canada, then you kind of need to get them out of the way, because they're just hurting the country.
Yeah.
I don't know why they want to not. Like, why wouldn't you want to have a data center in Alberta? Creates all these jobs. Yeah. It helps us with the AI race. It's great for the Canadian economy.
Consumes electrons, which we produce with natural gas turbines that are dirt cheap in Canada.
Boom,
where do I sign?
Yeah, I don't understand. Why do you guys not want this here? Yeah. I don't get it.
Well, I think Albertans do, and I think a lot of First Nations would if they had that opportunity. Again, get big government out of the way. Get Ottawa out of the way. Like, just get out of the way. Don't rely on government to manage your economy. I mean, what is that? It's socialism, and that's exactly what it is. I don't want to live in a country like that. I want to live in a country where you're rewarded for hard work and for doing something well, which we can do in this country, right? I mean, we talked before about, having all the resources that the world needs. We're also a highly educated society in Canada.
Yeah, we are.
Some very smart people. Yeah. Like as a Gregory Hinton, I mean, the guy, the grandfather of artificial intelligence, came out of U of T, as so did another guy who was instrumental in the advancements of AI. I mean, a lot of great things that come out of Canada, so we can exploit that as well. We're not stupid. We're very smart, and we've got a lot of things to offer the world, but allow us to do it. Stop stopping us in our tracks with government regulation, government red tape. This is wrong, this is right. I mean, you've got to have more of an element of pro-business and more freedom to do business in this country, and just get the red tape out of the way. Otherwise, we are going to fall further and further behind the U.S. It's just the way it's going to go, and it would be a shame. I don't want to see Canada like that.
Okay, you're king. 3 things you can do.
3 things?
Yeah. What are you doing to help Canada become a powerhouse again?
3 things. Can I go anywhere with that?
You can do anything.
I've always said this. If I was king, everybody in Canada would learn at least 3 languages: English, French, and Spanish, minimum.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a no-brainer. It's a lot better than learning home economics and woodworking. If they still have that in school. They had that when I was a kid.
Okay.
I would certainly be pro-business. You need to lower the cost of doing business in Canada. You need to incentivize people to come to Canada to build business, because we are at a disadvantage to the U.S.
Does that mean lower taxes?
Yes.
Does that mean...
Well, incentivize, right? This is the way Trump looks at things, too. Yeah. If you incentivize industry to come back to the U.S., repatriate through tariffs, ultimately more people are employed and paying taxes in the U.S. So we kind of have to, like before, the example I used about let's get a pipeline for natural gas built to the East Coast. To me, it's a no-brainer, right? It's good for everybody in the country. It's jobs, it's revenue, it's royalties, you know. So that would be number 2.
Number 3.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Bring the Habs back to the promised land.
They are. I was going to wear my Habs hat today, but I thought they lost last night. That would be a little bit presumptuous.
Yeah.
Do you know, I was watching, I'm going off track here, and you might want to edit this out, but I decided to watch the Leafs game on Wednesday night because it was the only game on and it wasn't blacked out.
Okay.
So the pregame show, the panelists that were on were sharing a question amongst themselves. Who would you like to see the Leafs play in the first round? I think it's a little presumptuous to think with 35, 36 games left in the league. In the season, we're barely past the halfway point, and the Leafs have a 3-point lead over the second place team and a 9-point lead over, they're basically 10 points from being out of the playoffs.
That's
and they're talking about who do you want to play in the first round. So
no, we're definitely not editing this out.
The first guy that answered said, I want Montreal.
Okay.
I want Montreal because they're young and they're inexperienced.
Yeah.
So I thought, that's kind of strange.
Well, yeah, what happened last time you guys thought that?
So I looked into it, as I usually do. There are 8 Canadians players on the current roster that have played in a Stanley Cup final, and 2 of them have won.
Interesting.
Toronto has 2 players that have been to a Stanley Cup final, and both of them won the Cup last year, or over the last few years. It was Stolarz, the goalie, and I think Larson Ekman, is that his name, the defenseman? Yeah. I think they both played for the Panthers last year. Okay. So that's their Stanley Cup final experience. And our experience comes from the time that we came from 3 games to 1 down to beat them and go to the Cup final.
That was nice.
Yeah.
Oh, man. That felt so good.
Yeah. So the other thing I would say is our obligation to NATO. Like, I agree. Like,
okay, so that's number 3. Okay, we're back on being king? We're back on
being king, yeah. Like, look, I mean.
So number 1, you tell everyone in Canada you got to learn 3 languages.
Yeah.
Number 2, pro-business.
Yeah.
So incentivize business, foreign and domestic, to just reinvest in capital expenditures, research and development.
Smarter about business. Like, make it easier in Canada, not more difficult.
And what was the third you just said?
Let's meet our NATO obligations.
NATO.
We've always been a country that stepped up in times of need, right? World War I, World War II, whatever. We stepped up before a lot of other nations stepped up, particularly our neighbors to the south. I might throw that in there. But to not meet our obligations, to me, it's a disgrace to our military. It's disrespectful of our military and people that have given their lives for our freedom, right? Like, we got to pull our weight. Without a doubt, we got to at least pull our 2% weight, if not more.
I think it's just dumb, and it just shows for like the current administration with the Liberals. It's like, and I don't think they're malicious. I really don't. I think they're incompetent, and I think it just shows a complete lack of understanding what's happening geopolitically around the world right now.
Yeah.
Like, it's so clear that we could have conflict in the world. It's way higher chances today than it was 10 years, 5 years, even 2 years ago. Much higher chances of the U.S. getting pulled into more wars, or Canada, or having a world war. I hope there's never a world war, but I hope I don't live through one. But I mean, there could be a world war. It's possible. What happens if China invades Taiwan? What happens? Like, there's so many things that could happen. Yeah. And I just think it's stupid. Like,
you have to be able to defend yourself. You have to be stronger than your adversaries.
But and it's nice to see, because all these globalist policies, and they're finally coming to fruition now, and people are seeing them for what they are, and they're failing.
Yeah.
So if you look at Europe's going through the same thing. They don't have an army. Their army's pretty much been decimated. The UK doesn't have an army. If Russia wanted to go in there, they'd slap them around. Yes, NATO would come to their rescue, but kind of going off on a tangent now, but there's this podcast I listened to, the Duran podcast, and there was something that they were so the people in Brussels were essentially saying they're really upset the fact that Trump is going to go negotiate with Putin directly, and Europe's not going to be there. And they're really upset, saying, no, we need to be there. And the guy on the Duran podcast was basically saying that if the U.S. Completely gets out of Ukraine, it's going to essentially render Europe like they're off the map now, because they don't even have the U.S. there anymore. So they're gonna fade off into irrelevance, essentially. So he goes, it's actually in Europe's interest militarily to keep the war going in Ukraine and to keep America there, because America will remain involved in Europe, which will give Europe more influence on the global stage.
Yeah.
I found that just interesting. But it's kind of like these guys, the world is a nasty place, and I think you need to take defense seriously. And I agree with you 100%. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that a country like Canada doesn't have the 2% NATO obligations, and we're just taking for granted the fact that we live next to the biggest military power in the world. That's straight up what it is.
As a Canadian, I'm embarrassed by the fact that we don't pull our weight.
There's a lot of things I'm embarrassed about right now.
I have all the time in the world and all the respect for the military, people that serve. One of my passions is reading about military history, and especially Canadian. We're doing a disservice to them and to ourselves. It's embarrassing to me that we do not carry our weight because we don't throw the money into it. We waste money on a lot of agendas that are a complete throwaway of resources. Take that money and put it into the military. Like, let's carry our weight in that. That's something that I feel very strongly about, obviously.
Yes.
And I think, if geopolitics, I think there's a lot of nations in Europe that, again, are very fine military. I mean, the UK, just to pick one, I mean, that's a great military history that you have there, obviously. Even Poland, I have a lot of respect for Poland. Like, I wouldn't want to mess with them. And I don't think that, I think they've made that clear. Like, the line is definitely drawn on our border. With Sweden and Finland joining NATO. I mean, it is the strongest military in the world, but you've got to, if you want to be in the club, you got to pay the dues, right? You got to pay your 2% at least, because we benefit from it. Yeah. We can't go it alone. If Russia decides to mess with us in the north, or the Chinese, we can't go at it alone. You need allies. And I hope that Trump's negotiating tactics, in that regard, I'm on board with him. Mm-hmm. You got to get everybody to, ante up, pay their dues.
Well, as they should. That's the deal.
Yeah, it's the deal.
You want to be part of NATO? 2% GDP. It's not complicated.
No,
Why
it's
aren't you
not.
paying the 2%?
Yeah,
that's the deal.
Yeah, it's not complicated at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to end it.
Yeah.
You have anything else you'd like to throw in there?
Go Habs, go.
Go Habs, go. Thank you very much, Bill.
You're welcome.
Cheers.
Bye.